Dr. Carol Francis here. Welcome back. We're going to talk about anger. Anger. See, anger is probably related to why you're here. Someone got out of control with their anger or got out of control with their aggressiveness and caused trauma and abuse in your life to take hold. That may not always be the reason why people are traumatized or abused, but it's a pretty large component of it. So we learn to just feel like all anger just leads to awful things. All of it's just bad and awful and evil. So then we have been taught in various societies, not all cultures, have been taught that you don't feel anger. You shouldn't feel that way. Don't you be angry with me. Don't you get angry at me. Don't you yell at me. Don't, right? So we really don't learn how to integrate our anger in with the whole of who we are. And remember also that I consider emotions spices of life, and anger is one of those spices. Love and anger, though, are also not opposite ends of each other, and they're also not just necessarily spices, because anger is also a self-preservation response. It's the ability to fight. It's the ability to be upset. It's the ability for knowing when some injustice has taken place. It's the ability to stand up for yourself. And there's lots of power in that ability. And we associate that capacity for aggression with anger because it does activate very similar parts of the brain. And it does feel that same because you're willing to fight. You're willing to harm. You're willing to defend. And you're willing to do whatever it takes, potentially, or in that direction. So this energy that comes from deep inside and wells up and makes people yell and scream and the blood circulate and the amygdala turn on and the muscles activate. It's very aggressive and very energetic. Well, love can be extremely empowering as well. But we feel more vulnerable when we love because we feel like we're giving our heart to this other person and they're supposed to take care of it. And if they don't, it's going to hurt, and it will. But really, we should give love to another person, and we don't leave it in their care. We just give it, and we detach from the giving of it. Not that we don't connect emotionally and connect to the person, but it's a gift. Love's a gift. So we often don't know how to do the loving part in a gifting sort of way and in an empowering sort of way because we feel like we give love and will you please take care of it. Excuse my acting, but that does move love into the belief that it's very disempowering, but it's not. Love is very powerful, especially when it comes from you to give to someone else and you leave it there because you know you're empowered to give, and especially, secondly, when you don't give more than you can give, which I talked about in the previous class. But now what I would talk about love, and we're here to talk about anger, because anger can often be the expression of love. So just think of a mother bear. A mother bear sees a predator with a gun, human being, and goes and charges that human being and claws at him and so on and so on. Why? Because she's got cubs in the bushes and she doesn't want them hurt. She loves her cubs and she will rescue them even at risk to her own life. That's love, but it's manifesting in terms of aggression, and it feels to the person being attacked as if there's a predator charging. If it's traumatizing to the hunter, and yet realize maybe it's not a hunter, maybe it's just a hiker that's mistaken as a hunter. So that could be very traumatized. You could feel like that bear's out of control, and yet that bear may be expressing the very epitome of love. Now wonder if you too get angry because of the same reasons. And guess who your cubs are? Whomever you're in charge of, and also yourself. So if you're defending yourself, if you're standing up for yourself, you feel like you're loving yourself. Here's something that's kind of tricky about this. If you're used to being completely indulged, or you feel like the whole world should evolve around you, you're going to, how dare you? And that is what I would call the narcissistic anger that's invested in being loved. How dare you not love me? Which is very different than you're not going to harm me or anybody else I love. That's protection. However, with a narcissistic individual, when they're not loved, they feel attacked. Oh, you're not loving me. How dare you? I'm going to attack you. You're doing wrong. Because narcissism, when it is not receiving what it needs, feels like it's going to lose its life. It feels threatening to the core, because the development of a person who has this type of narcissism feels very at risk, and the well-being of that individual is in the other person's hands. And so when that other person's not giving love, they get protective of themselves. But it's just because they become so self-centered, so into their own survival on this kind of real, you are there to exist for me. And there is times when abusiveness comes from that same narcissistic rage. So I wanted you to be aware of that type of anger that comes in the interexchange with abusiveness. We have also found that individuals who have robbed, done shootings, and so forth and so on, they're also expressing this kind of narcissistic rage. It is not amazing to me that some of these shooters have shot a member of their family dead, and they go out and they shoot others, and then they shoot themselves, because they're expressing this absolute, like, how dare you? And then it comes out in the form of attacking. And that type of attack, how dare you, is because they are feeling so completely harmed inside themselves. But now that's different when you become angry because you respect you. When you become angry because you respect you, and you also want to respect that other person, but that other person is clearly threatening you, not just making you feel like this narcissistic, self-centered rage and you're not being gratified somehow, but when you know that person has a gun on you and you need to protect you and others, that rage inside of you is there to make you functional, to fight the battle. One of the things that's very difficult for soldiers is, in order to be able to fight the battle, they had to develop a consciousness, and the military even created the consciousness that we're fighting the enemy for the protection of our society. And while there may be truth in that matrix of looking things on one level of looking at things, a soldier who has adapted that may be aggressive merely because they feel like they're saving the people back home, they're saving their buddies, and they're saving themselves against that person over there. But what becomes really confusing for soldiers is when they know they've shot someone that feels like that someone is like, another human being. And then they're completely vexed. Have I bombed a whole village or a whole city or a group of innocent people? Oh, how horrible that feels. I remember one time when I was in an in an airport, and I was sitting next to a soldier, and because I'm probably too probing, I will admit that, I asked the soldier how it felt it was in the context of a very long and intimate conversation, so this is out of context, how it felt to shoot. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible, the way he felt about it, what he said, the stories he told, the way he reacted. It was very hard for him to justify that he was going back, and he wanted to fight, and he wanted to go back, and there was so much benefit to him going back, including that he could be with buddies that understood him and got him, including that it was really good pay that he could support his family with. But at the other end of it, he knew the horribleness of feeling like he was participating in killing innocent kids, women, men that were in the line of it all, or just not even understand. They were just human beings. They're just other human beings. Do you remember the story about the World War II soldiers, where on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day they stopped fighting and they began to dance with each other, playing music, just enjoying each other, and then at the end of Christmas Eve they go back to their foxholes, and the next day they start killing each other? That's tough. That's awful. It doesn't make sense. And so it's that feeling of, I could love this person, they're not too different than me, and I'm going to kill them? So this act of aggression, when it feels so wrong, is really hard to deal with. And that's one time that people feel like they just really can't even trust themselves. Their anger feels so big, they're so triggered to fighting and combat, they're so conditioned to attack. Individuals who have been sexually and physically and verbally abused as children, some individuals just become abusers themselves. Not all, by a long shot, but some become abusers themselves, and they hate it because they know what it was like to be on the receiving end. But on the other hand, and they also feel like it's the right thing to do because they're defending themselves. They've learned how to fight back finally, and it feels empowering, even though it's actually abusive. So this experience of your anger and being able to, what is my anger sourced in? When is my anger perfectly helpful, perfectly healthy, perfectly assisting, perfectly self-loving, perfectly loving to others? And when is my anger just scrambled up in all these experiences that I don't even know how to unscramble. So I've given you a lot of different possible scenarios for why anger might exist inside of you. And there are probably others as well. So what I want you to do now in this, the knowledge gain and the self-reflection, is to be able to ask yourself, why do I get angry? When do I get angry? What's the cause of the anger? What's the goal of the anger? Where does my sense of empowerment fit in this anger, so that I know when I'm trying to give myself power that boosts me up? When is my anger actually a real connection of authentic, genuine, healthy love? When is it a narcissistic self-exploitation that exploits others and harms others because I'm somehow not gratified? When is my anger there to correct the wrongs and injustices in society? I got angry at the Pope Francis the other day, and I wrote him a lot of different notes and basically said, you have got to speak up loudly, protest definitively, and change the behavior of the Catholic Church's response to the priests and the clerics that have abused, sexually groomed individuals to be molested and completely manipulated. These are the people that represent the Catholic Church, but more than that, you cannot go silent like the churches have in the past, and you've been far too passive. I don't know if it was me or a series of the rest of us that got really upset that he was being relatively quiet. Not completely, because he actually had been more active than other popes on this issue, which I'm very grateful for. That's one reason I spoke up. I thought maybe this pope will actually listen. The very next day, within 24 hours, he wrote a wonderfully intense description saying, we have failed the people whom we have harmed, and we cannot do that. We have got to correct this wrong, and we've got to make it factual, and we've got to make it actual, and we can no longer put our heads in the sand. He says it's much better, and I have this on my Facebook and on the abuse and trauma recovery group so that you can read his whole statement. I wrote back to him and I said, thank you so much. However, we need to turn your amazing words into actions, because until we see actions, we cannot believe cheap words. I have anger toward what happened for those people. People I have worked with, people that you may know, unsuspecting people that don't want to admit it. I have anger that those people have been harmed by people that were supposed to be trustworthy. And I believe that that anger is there out of love, because I want individuals to be empowered and kept safe, and to be able to speak what's just and right so that they can recover. That to me is an example of loving but expressing it out of an aggressive anger. Another time, we were taking a family vacation. We were at one of the beautiful sacred grounds in the island of Hawaii. And since I have some Native American background inside of me and in my blood and my flesh, and I took my children at the time, very, very little, and we started to honor the sacred spot and this other group of individuals and their interesting way of having a gesture of their sacred practices, began to throw newspapers, cans, and glass bottles and plastic bottles down the canyon. And I was appalled. I was so angry that they would do this to the sacred land. And I mean, we were all told, no, don't trash anything. This is sacred land. And coming from my background, I understand sacred land. And even if I didn't, I think I should be respectful of sacred land. This is someone else's special space, and I am allowed to visit its beauty. And so are these other people. I got furious with the situation, and my anger was translated into yelling and screaming at them, getting them to stop, getting them to pick up their trash. And there were so many other vacationers there that started to do exactly the same thing. We literally ran those people out of the national park. I'm kind of embarrassed to make this public on one hand, because no wonder if those people were just doing what they thought they should do in their sacred practice and didn't realize it was really offensive. On the other hand, I'm really glad that I was proactive, because I want my children to know how to be proactive when people are doing things that are disrespectful. I want them to understand the power, the energy, the intent, the bravery, and the courage behind being able to do something like that. This is akin to something I'm going to teach you and do a whole course with called grit. This is grit. Now, am I tooting my own horn? Yeah, maybe. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that I funneled my anger into doing something I thought was to the benefit of the majority of people, protecting a land that was innocent and making sure that people who did not respect that picked up and left and stopped doing what they were doing. So I could be tooting my own horn. Maybe you even disagree with that. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to illustrate, is that anger always has kind of this dual-sided edge to it. It feels okay, but maybe it's not okay. I think anger and love require a tremendous amount of self-scrutiny so that you take responsibility for being the most respectful of others and yourself as you possibly can. So there's that equation again. I respect you, I respect me simultaneously. That's the equanimity of both of us coexisting. And when I am disrespectful, I should be angry with myself. When I am disrespectful, I should expect that someone else that sees that and is proactive should probably call me on it. And when they're disrespectful, should I just hide from it? Should I squeeze? Maybe, because it depends on how safe it is to confront it straightforwardly. Or should I require a message of respect like I did with the Pope? And like I do often, I'm very proactive. I really dislike that the water was poisoned in Flint, Michigan. I've been as proactive as I possibly can. I really dislike that the pipeline in the Dakotas is going to cause more fracking and spoiling of natural resources of water. I really hate that the fracking companies are spoiling the natural resources of water in Montana, and that the Blackfeet Nation of Indians has allowed such to occur because they get paid so well by the government and by the oil companies, and they're given jobs. But I hate that this land and the water is being spoiled. But at the same time, these are complex situations. So there's a time to be very proactive. There's also a time to realize that that angry proactiveness requires the art of being responsible and in check and governing what means to be respectful and what isn't respectful. Always weighing those two together. So consider that as an aspect of your anger as well. And then finally, maybe, just maybe, you don't even know where your anger is. You don't even care enough to be angry. Or maybe you feel so powerless you don't have anger. Maybe you have no sense of energy to have any sense of wrong or right. And that is the stage that you're in. You're so flat. You're so flat in affect. You're so blah. You're so, can't find myself. I don't even have the spice of anger inside me. I can't even get angry on my own behalf. I can't even get angry at my own abuser or traumatic situation. I'm so depleted. And that is also a reaction to abuse and trauma. And the process of being able to move back into even the healthy anger may be several things. One, to replenish your physical body. Take the time to heal in terms of your emotions and your psychology as each of these courses travels down. But also realize that one of the ways moving back into yourself may be through the path of anger. And through the path of anger, when that wakes up, it may startle you. It may be so intense, it may scare you, and you may need to put a lot of checks and balances on you because your anger may feel like a rage that you cannot control. And that may be one reason why you go into this complete blah, because you feel like you can't trust your anger. You feel so full of revenge, so full of wanting to take revenge on someone that caused you such harm or caused others such harm that caused you to be traumatized. And so that path of moving and waking your emotions back up may actually have to go through the chambers of anger and navigating that. Once again, I want you to reflect on that process, and once again, really believe that going through this process in a group or with individual therapy is essential so that you can feel the anger and maintain your sense of safety and respect for yourself and others, and yet have the authenticity of what that anger is all about as you recapture your sense of self-respect. Because if you have been traumatized and abused by another individual, it's just wrong that they did that to you. It is. There's nothing okay about it. And simultaneously, you've got to, on some level, realize that your waking up to anger is an act of love on your own behalf. Now, what do you do with that? Please do not act in violence. It'll backfire on you and everybody else. And you may just have to put yourself in a little kind of emotional gel and say to your anger, we cannot get violent here. We cannot do violence against those that did violence to us. But we may have to be courageous in figuring out really productive ways of keeping people safe from that individual, going after that individual, or even going to court, or even, I don't know what the even is. I don't know what makes it even. But you have to realize there's got to be savvy to it, and don't cause yourself and people who care about you further harm by doing something that's going to have deleterious impact on you in the future. So these are aspects of navigating this whole experience, this whole landscape of anger inside of you. And there's so much more. Of course, there's always so much more. We are complex human beings. But take this and build on that and go forth. I'll see you on the next class. And that's when we talk about fear and panic. It's just such delightful experiences, right? Okay, bye.